So, Sri Akal, welcome to I'm a Brown Girl. My name's Amma. Today's episode is very special to me because it's very close to my heart. I want to share my recent experience of reading my first ever fiction book, which was based on real life events. That was the 1947 partition between India and Pakistan. The book's called Baby There's a Runner by Anita Rani, and I wanted to take the opportunity to share what I've learned, how it connects to recent issues around the world, how I was able to learn so much from my parents and their experience and draw personal stories. The book helped me connect with my parents a lot, and I learned so much about how the partition affected their family, which essentially means my family and the generations around them and relatives and people in their villages. There was so much that I was not aware of. So for quite a while, I've been saying that I want to get more into fiction books, and there was something about this book that just drew me to it, a bit like when you do walk into a bookshop and you're like, what book should I buy? And it's a bit like the book will find you before you find it. It was my first time crying whilst reading a book, and I was able to relate to it very deeply, and it was emotional towards the end. The partition of India in 1947 was one of the largest mass migrations in history. It led to the creation of two independent nations, India and Pakistan. So many people died, and I'm not surprised that I wasn't educated about this because British history that is taught in schools is barely covering the important parts of history around the world. This book made me want to learn more about my history and what my parents and their family went through. Similarly to Baby, who's the main character in the book, wanted to question her life. I don't want to spoil the book because I'd recommend you to read it. But essentially, Baby, who's the main character, finds these letters from her grandma that she's hidden, that she shouldn't have probably read, but ended up reading anyway, that revealed some family secrets. And after finding out those secrets, she basically goes on a runner to India to find out her family history and the family secrets that no one had told her about. And through doing that, she was able to find herself, connect with her culture, connect with her religion, her family that she hadn't done in almost 35 years, because that's how old she was in the book. And from that, she was able to learn so much about the partition and how it affected her family, and also reconnect with people within her family that she didn't know about. Over 14 million people were displaced during the partition, and estimates of the death toll range between 200,000 and 2 million, which is not even an accurate number because we'll never know. There were entire communities that were torn apart overnight. Families were forced to migrate. There was a lot of violence. There was a loss of homes and loved ones. And that is only a very PG explanation of what truly happened in terms of the depth of the violence, because it was horrific. What got me the most was how the book humanized a lot of these historical events. I didn't feel like I was reading a fiction book. It showed personal stories of families being torn apart. It helped me understand the emotional trauma millions and millions of people had experienced, and these people were my people. Anita's story writing style made me realize that just because these events happened in the past shouldn't mean that they are to be forgotten, that they're not just history, they're lessons of today, and history tends to repeat itself, and it definitely is, especially with what's happening in Gaza. There are still families and communities amongst India and Pakistan who don't know they are related. There are families who are only reuniting after 70, 80 years, which wasn't that long ago, and it's heartbreaking to see. I was recently speaking to a good friend of mine about just the current affairs of the world, war, and how it's almost a dystopian world we live in, because here we are. Well, I'm in London, in my space, safe, living a good life. And then there's people in Gaza who are dying innocently, no fault of their own. And it's messed up. Is it really happening? I can't believe it, but you have to believe it because it is happening. We get to sit here comfortably, go about our lives whilst people are dying, and we have to exist at the same time whilst this is happening in the world. It's messed up. It's messed up. Though the partition of 1947 isn't exactly the same as what's happening in Gaza, there are similarities in terms of the displacement and the violence and the hurt that is caused to these innocent people. I don't even have the words to explain how deeply I feel about Gaza and what's happening there. It makes me feel so emotional, and I feel incredibly passionate about wanting that to stop. my history about the partition and how people who I was probably related to had lost their life, or relatives or people in my community. And I felt like, as a woman, I really felt connected to my Punjabi, Pakistani, Hindu brothers and sisters who lost their lives during that time. Like, I feel incredibly connected and passionate about what happened. And it makes me deeply sad that this is still happening and people are dying innocently. For people who are not actually in the war, like myself, or ever experienced anything like that, how do you just continue living life normally knowing that's happening? It's not normal. I was also speaking to my parents about the partition and how it affected their family. And they were saying how it didn't directly affect them and their family. However, it would have affected my grandparents because they were alive during a time when the partition was happening actively. And luckily, my family wasn't affected directly. But my grandparents in general, they would have experienced the partition. My parents were saying how people and communities and families had to up and leave on the same night to migrate and be promised a land amongst their community, but that didn't end up happening. What ended up happening was a lot of violence and deaths. Essentially, the British rule had said that, well, if you're Muslim, go to Pakistan, and if you're Sikh and Hindu, go to India and migrate in the space that you want, where you belong within your communities. But that didn't end up happening, and people became violent and died, and people were killed whilst migrating. There was a story where my dad told me how there was a family in his village where the dad of the family had sacrificed all the women, including his wife, his daughters, and saved his oldest son and his youngest son, because it was better to sacrifice the women in their family rather than being raped or paraded in the streets indecently for their fathers and for people to see. So that's why they were better off being sacrificed. These were just a few of the horrible things that had happened during the partition. I still feel like I have huge knowledge gaps, and I'm still educating myself and learning and asking more questions to my family because I want to know more. But this is only some of the things that I've learned over the past week that I felt incredibly passionate to share. It also made me think about the older generation who would have experienced the partition when they were very young. And there's already a well-known fact that the older generation find it hard to talk about their feelings. So a lot of older people in their 70s, 80s, 90s might have a hard time talking about the partition because it was incredibly traumatic, and they already don't talk about their feelings. So they were never able to truly share that hurt and trauma. It's not only Indian history that suffered a lot. There's history around the world that your grandparents have probably experienced. So it's worth asking them so that you know and you can educate yourself. I wish I had my grandparents around. I have my granddad around. We're not the closest and I barely speak to him. But after reading this book, I think I might have a conversation with him to be like, what happened? How was it? What was your experience like? And hopefully he is able to share more. And if he is, I will definitely be talking about it. This whole experience made me realize how important it is to look inwards and find out more about your culture and history and speak to your parents about their experience of when they were younger. And I want to know these things. I recently found out that one of my aunties was given up for adoption. She's still alive and I know her, but this is why she had two families and I had no idea. And my dad was saying that, oh yeah, this is why sometimes she'll go to this city to visit so and so. And I was like, why? And he was like, oh, because she's adopted. I never knew one of my aunties was adopted and I'm 25 years old. How did I not know that? I feel like the next time I go to India, there's so much more digging that I want to do. Even when it came to my auntie and uncle who I stayed with, who I absolutely adore. And if you have listened to my podcast, especially when I was traveling, I spoke about them a lot. They're on my Instagram. So if you scroll a little bit down, there's a picture of them. They're the sweetest old couple. They've been together for so many years. They got married quite young. They were saying how during the time of Operation Blue Star, the Golden Temple in Amritsar was attacked by the army under the command of Indira Gandhi. They went there after the violence and helped clean up the Golden Temple. I never knew that. I only found that out a couple of months ago when I was in India. To think that my auntie and uncle went during a historical event to clean up the bloodshed, and I never knew that, is crazy to me. Hence why I feel so passionate about wanting to find out more and genuinely take the time to ask these questions, because if they don't tell me and if I don't ask them, I'll never know. I hope by listening to this episode, you are more curious to find out about your own family history. And if you have any stories from your family history or things that you found out a lot later in life that you didn't know about within your family and you feel comfortable to share, please feel free to. My DMs are always open. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share to your family and friends, your dog, your cat, whoever. I really appreciate all the engagement. It really means a lot. In terms of my end of episode check-in, if you can't already hear it, I think I'm coming down with the flu. My nose is a little bit blocked. I don't know what's happening. I think it might just be the weather or the fact that I'm extremely exhausted. I went for a festival for 2 days in a row and I was completely sober. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't take anything. And I don't know how I managed to do 2 days in a row, but that really shattered me and I'm still feeling the effects of recovery. It feels like I've got an extremely extended version of an extreme hangover. In terms of my mental health, I'm doing so much better. I feel like I'm able to breathe again. I feel at peace. I'm happier. I cannot even begin to express how difficult July was for me in terms of mental health and just the things that were happening around me. I think July was possibly the worst month out of this year, and I hope it remains the worst month of this year because August, which is my birthday month, is looking fantastic. I've got so much to look forward to. I'm booked and busy, and I'm genuinely so excited to turn 26 because I think I've now come to a point of just allowing life to do its thing. I have full trust in the universe and Vaheguru, which is God. So whatever is mine is already mine. It will come to me. I've also been spending a lot of time with my parents. Last episode was pretty much me saying that you could not pay me to live at home. And I still remain with the same statement. However, I have spent a lot more time at home. And on Sunday, my mum had just randomly called me and she was like, "Hey, have you eaten?" I was like, "No. Do you want to cook something for me?" And she was like, "Yeah, come over." She picked me up at about 9:30. And by 10:15, she had made me roti with sabji and it was 10:15 and I was done with eating. And I feel like I was able to really relax and just recover from the festival, which was great. But it also makes me very lazy at home. But it's the one time I can just completely relax and not have to use my brain and switch off because my mum and dad have taken really good care of me when I'm over, which I really appreciate. Apart from that, I've got a really busy week ahead of me. I've got meetings. I've got to be in Margate. I'm going to see my friend again. There's Margate Pride. I've never been to Pride before. I'm very excited. I'm going to be around a lot of queer people and that is exactly what I've been manifesting. And it's true when they say that there's a lot of power in words. I feel so refreshed. I feel energized. I feel like myself again. I feel like I can think straight again. And it goes to show what goes down must come up. That is just life. It's just the waves of life and you'll be fine. That brings me to the end of my episode. If you guys have any questions or you want to share your story, please feel free to. I really appreciate your engagement. I thank you for watching. I thank you for listening. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Sat Shri Akal. Bye.